I searched my name on the dark web. There's a live stream of my bedroom. My roommate Kyle showed me how to access the dark web during finals week, claiming it was where you could buy test answers and fake IDs without getting caught. I wasn't interested in either, but curiosity got the better of me when he mentioned you could search for leaked personal information to see if you'd been compromised in data breaches. So at 2 a.m. on a Wednesday, while Kyle was passed out drunk on our couch, I downloaded Tor browser and started poking around the hidden corners of the internet that most people never see. I typed my name into a dark web search engine, expecting maybe some old social media posts or my email showing up in a leaked database. What I found instead made my blood turn to ice. The third result was a link to a live stream, and the thumbnail showed my bedroom from an angle I'd never seen before, looking down from somewhere near the ceiling fan. I could see my desk, my bed with the unmade sheets, and the pile of laundry I'd been meaning to fold for 3 days. I clicked the link with shaking hands, and the stream loaded immediately in crisp HD quality. The timestamp in the corner showed it was live, updating in real time, and I could see myself sitting at my laptop with my back to the camera. My stomach dropped as I watched my own shoulders hunch forward on the screen, watched myself reach for my coffee mug and take a sip, the exact movement I'd just made in real life. Someone was watching me right now, at this very moment, and had been streaming it for God knows how long. I jumped up from my desk and spun around, searching every corner of my room for a camera. The angle suggested it was mounted up high, probably near the smoke detector or air vent, but I couldn't see anything obvious, even when I stood on my chair and examined every surface. The stream was still playing on my laptop, now showing my empty chair and the back of my head visible in the corner as I searched. I felt exposed in ways I'd never experienced before, like standing naked in front of a crowd I couldn't see. The stream had a chat window beside it, and that's when things got so much worse. There were 12 people currently viewing, their usernames displayed in the sidebar as they typed messages about me. "He just noticed," one wrote with a laughing emoji. "Took him long enough." Another commented, "Check the bookshelf. Third shelf from the bottom. You can see the lens if you look close enough." My hands were shaking as I walked to my bookshelf, hyper-aware that I was performing for an invisible audience, and examined the spot they'd mentioned. There, nestled between 2 textbooks I hadn't touched all semester, was a tiny black dot I'd always assumed was just a screw hole in the wood. When I pulled the books aside, I found a camera no bigger than a shirt button, its lens pointing directly at my bed and desk, the 2 places I spent most of my time. The setup was professional, not some amateur spy cam bought on Amazon. This had been installed by someone who knew what they were doing. I yanked the camera out, breaking the adhesive that held it in place, and threw it in my desk drawer. But the stream was still playing on my laptop, still showing my room from the same angle. There was a second camera, maybe more. The chat erupted with messages as I started tearing my room apart, pulling books off shelves, checking behind picture frames, running my hands along the ceiling tiles. "He's freaking out," someone wrote. "This is the best content we've had in weeks." Another user posted, "Wait until he finds the bathroom cam." My blood ran cold. I ran to the bathroom I shared with Kyle, locked the door, and started searching. It took me 15 minutes to find it, hidden inside the bathroom fan vent, pointing directly at the shower. I thought about every shower I'd taken in the past semester, every vulnerable moment I'd assumed was private, and felt violently sick. Back in my room, I grabbed my laptop and started recording the stream with my phone, documenting the chat, the viewers, everything. The usernames seemed random, sequences of letters and numbers, but I needed evidence of what was happening. One user with the name Architect29 posted a message that made my stomach twist. "Don't bother going to the police. We own 3 of them." Another wrote, "He's documenting. That's adorable." I slammed my laptop shut and ran to Kyle's room, shaking him awake despite his hangover groaning. When I showed him what I'd found on my phone recording, his face went white, and he immediately started checking his own room. He found 2 cameras within 10 minutes, one in his ceiling light fixture and another hidden inside a smoke detector that turned out to be completely fake. Someone had access to our apartment, had been inside while we were gone, had installed sophisticated surveillance equipment throughout. This wasn't a prank or random hacking. This was organized and deliberate and absolutely terrifying. Kyle wanted to rip everything out immediately, but I stopped him. We needed to be smart about this. If we destroyed all the cameras, whoever was behind this would know we'd found them and might escalate. Instead, I suggested we leave everything in place and act normal while we figured out what to do next. Kyle thought I was insane, but agreed when I pointed out that the chat had mentioned police being involved. We couldn't trust anyone yet. I went back to my laptop, opened the stream again, and started trying to find more information. The website hosting the stream had no visible branding, no about page, nothing that indicated who ran it. But the chat logs were archived, going back months. I started scrolling through old conversations, and what I found made me realize this was so much bigger than I'd imagined. There were references to other streams, other people being watched, a whole network of surveillance victims that these people were monitoring and discussing. One archived chat from 3 weeks ago mentioned Subject 14 having a breakdown when they found their cameras. Another talked about how Subject 22 had gone to the police and learned their lesson. I searched for any mention of my name or apartment number and found that I was subject 31. Kyle was subject 32. We'd been assigned numbers like lab rats in an experiment. The earliest mention of us in the chat was from August, right after we'd moved into this apartment. Someone had written, "New subjects acquired. Installation scheduled for Sept 3rd. I checked my calendar. September 3rd was a Wednesday when both Kyle and I had been in classes all day. They'd known our schedules, had waited for the perfect window, had come into our home and violated our privacy with surgical precision. The level of planning and coordination suggested this wasn't some perverted individual with too much time. This was organized crime or something worse. I found a forum link in one of the old chats and followed it down another rabbit hole. The forum was dedicated entirely to discussing the people being surveilled, with separate threads for each subject. My thread had 89 pages of posts. I started reading from the beginning and immediately wished I hadn't. They knew everything about me. My class schedule, my grades, the girl I'd hooked up with twice last month, the fact that I'd cried after calling my mom on her birthday because I was homesick. They'd watched me at my most vulnerable moments and turned them into entertainment for strangers on the internet. One post from October analyzed my sleeping patterns and diagnosed me with possible depression based on how long I stayed in bed. Another discussed my eating habits and speculated about whether I had an eating disorder. They'd been studying me like I was a specimen under a microscope, and I'd never had any idea. The worst posts were the ones making predictions about my future. Users would bet on things like whether I'd pass my midterms, whether the girl would text me back, whether I'd finally do my laundry, or just keep wearing dirty clothes. They'd gamified my life, turned my struggles into content for their amusement. One user had created a spreadsheet tracking my daily routines down to 15-minute intervals. Another had compiled all my social media posts and cross-referenced them with the footage to create a psychological profile. The thoroughness was disturbing, but what really scared me was finding posts discussing what they called interventions. Apparently, when subjects started getting boring, the people running this operation would sometimes introduce stimulation to generate better content. I found references to staged break-ins, planted evidence, anonymous messages designed to cause paranoia. They were actively manipulating people's lives to create drama worth watching. I searched for posts about other subjects and found dozens of threads, each representing another person being watched without their knowledge. Some had been under surveillance for years. I found one thread about Subject 7 that went back to 2019, containing thousands of posts discussing this person's life in excruciating detail. The most recent post was from 2 days ago and simply said, "Subject 7 moved, lost feed, disappointing end to a solid run." They talked about us like TV shows that got canceled. I clicked on a thread for Subject 22, the one who'd gone to the police, and found posts laughing about how the police investigation had gone nowhere because certain connections had made the evidence disappear. One post included a photo of a police report with sections redacted, but enough visible to confirm it was real. These people had infiltrated law enforcement, or at least had friends in positions to make complaints vanish. Kyle was pacing around our living room, having his own breakdown about what this meant for his life. I tried to calm him down while simultaneously processing my own spiral of paranoia. If we couldn't go to the police, who could we trust? Campus security was a joke. Our landlord was a 70-year-old man who barely understood email. Our parents couldn't help us from hundreds of miles away. We were on our own against an organization sophisticated enough to install hidden cameras in multiple apartments and run a streaming operation without getting caught. I went back to the forum and started looking for any identifying information about who was behind this. The administrators used pseudonyms, but one of them had made a mistake 6 months ago. In a thread about technical difficulties, someone with the username Overseer had posted a screenshot to demonstrate a problem with the streaming software. The screenshot showed his desktop, and in the corner was a folder name, Brightwell Operations 2024. I searched for Brightwell Operations and found nothing on the regular internet, but on the dark web, the name appeared in several forums discussing various illegal activities. Brightwell was apparently some kind of underground organization that specialized in surveillance and blackmail, though details were vague and possibly unreliable. One post claimed they operated out of Eastern Europe, another said they were based in Nevada, a third insisted they didn't have a physical location at all and were just a distributed network of hackers. What everyone seemed to agree on was that Brightwell was not an organization you wanted to cross. They had resources, connections, and a reputation for destroying anyone who threatened their operations. I found one story about a journalist who'd been investigating them and ended up discredited and bankrupt within 6 months. His career destroyed by a series of perfectly timed scandals involving fabricated evidence. I took screenshots of everything I found, uploading them to an encrypted cloud storage service in case our laptops got seized or destroyed. Kyle thought I was being paranoid, but I reminded him about Subject 22 and the police investigation that vanished. We needed backup plans and contingencies. That night, neither of us slept. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to spot the remaining cameras I knew were still hidden somewhere in my room. Every small noise made me jump. Every shadow seemed suspicious. I kept thinking about all the private moments they'd witnessed, all the things I'd done assuming I was alone. The humiliation was crushing, but underneath it was a growing anger. These people had violated something fundamental, had stolen my privacy, and sold it to strangers for entertainment. I wasn't going to let them get away with it. The next morning, I went to class like nothing had happened, but I couldn't focus on anything the professor said. My mind was racing through possibilities, trying to figure out a plan that didn't end with us being crushed by an organization with unlimited resources and police connections. During lunch, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. The message was short. "We know you know. Act normal or face consequences." I showed it to Kyle and watched his hands start shaking. They were monitoring more than just the cameras. They had our phone numbers, probably our email, maybe access to everything we did online. We were trapped in a panopticon, and the wardens were reminding us they were always watching. I deleted the text and went to my next class, my mind already working on how to respond. That afternoon, I did something risky. I went back to the stream on my laptop, made sure the cameras could see me clearly, and started playing a game. I opened a document and began typing a fake story about a friend who'd found hidden cameras in his apartment and was planning to call the FBI. I typed slowly, making sure anyone watching could read the words on my screen. I mentioned specific details about FBI cybercrime divisions and federal surveillance laws, all completely made up, but hopefully convincing enough to worry whoever was monitoring me. Then I closed the document without saving it and went to take a shower, leaving my laptop open on my desk. When I came back 20 minutes later, there was a new text. "Cute attempt. The FBI doesn't care about your cameras." So they were definitely watching my screen, reading everything I typed. That confirmed they had remote access to my laptop, not just physical cameras in my room. I spent the next 3 days pretending everything was normal while secretly researching everything I could find about Brightwell operations. The more I dug, the more horrifying the picture became. They weren't just running surveillance on random college students. That was apparently their training ground, where new operatives learned the technical skills before graduating to more lucrative targets. I found vague references to blackmail schemes targeting business executives, politicians, and celebrities. The student surveillance was partly about practice and partly about building a database of potential future targets, people who might become important someday and could be compromised years later with footage from their college days. I was being watched not just for current entertainment, but as a long-term investment in potential blackmail material. Every stupid thing I did now could be weaponized against me decades later. Kyle found a post on the forum discussing the selection process for new subjects. Apparently they targeted students who fit certain profiles, isolated from family, limited social connections, unlikely to be believed if they reported something, living in buildings where access was easy. They'd specifically chosen our apartment complex because the landlord had a master key hanging on a hook in his office, easy to copy for anyone who spent 5 minutes alone with it. We'd been selected because we were vulnerable, because we wouldn't be missed if things went wrong, because we were disposable to the people who made decisions about whose privacy mattered. The realization was crushing. We'd thought we were just two random guys going to college. Turns out we'd been marked as perfect victims from the moment we'd signed our lease. I found a thread discussing what happened to subjects who became problematic. The posts were vague, probably deliberately, but the implication was clear. People who threatened to expose the operation or fought back too aggressively sometimes experienced unfortunate accidents. One post mentioned a subject who died in a car crash 2 days after threatening to go to the media. Another talked about a subject who'd overdosed on pills they'd never been prescribed. The posts framed these as tragedies, coincidences, but the timing was always suspicious. They were warning their viewers what happened to people who didn't play along, maintaining control through fear and carefully orchestrated accidents that could never be proven. I showed these posts to Kyle and watched what little color remained in his face drain away completely. We were dealing with people who'd killed to protect their operation, and we'd just spent 3 days documenting their crimes. That night, I made a decision. If we were going to go down, we'd take them with us. I started recording everything, every stream, every chat message, every forum post I could access. I created multiple backup copies across different cloud services, some in my name, some in fake accounts, spreading the evidence across so many locations that destroying it all would be impossible. I wrote detailed accounts of everything we'd discovered, including timestamps and screenshots, building a comprehensive case file. Then I started looking for allies. I found 3 other usernames in the chat who'd expressed sympathy for subjects, who seemed uncomfortable with the cruelty they were witnessing. I sent them private messages through the forum, carefully worded to avoid triggering any automated monitoring systems. 2 ignored me completely. The third responded, "You're either brave or stupid, probably both. Meet me here tomorrow at noon." They'd included a link to an encrypted chat room. The next day at noon, I logged into the encrypted chat room from a library computer, using a VPN to hide my location. The person I'd messaged was already waiting, their username showing as Remorseful Watcher. They claimed they'd been part of Brightwell operations for 2 years, helping maintain the technical infrastructure, but had grown disgusted with what the organization had become. They said it started as a security research project, testing surveillance detection and counter-surveillance techniques, but had evolved into something much darker when the founders realized they could monetize the footage. Now it was pure exploitation, with dozens of subjects being watched around the clock and a paying subscriber base in the thousands. Remorseful Watcher offered to help me take down the operation, but warned it would be dangerous and possibly futile. They'd seen 4 previous whistleblowers destroyed before their information could go public. I asked Remorseful Watcher what I needed to do, and they sent me a list of requirements. First, I needed to secure copies of the footage with visible timestamps and identifying information about the streaming platform. Second, I needed to document the financial transactions. Brightwell funded their operations through cryptocurrency, but somewhere there had to be connections to real-world banking systems. Third, I needed to identify at least 3 of the administrators with their real names and locations, enough to give law enforcement something concrete to investigate. Fourth, and most importantly, I needed to find media outlets that couldn't be intimidated or bought off, journalists with the resources and courage to fight back when Brightwell tried to destroy them. Remorseful Watcher estimated this would take months of careful work, and every day we delayed was another day of footage they could use against us. But rushing would get us killed, so we had to be patient and strategic. Over the next 6 weeks, I lived a double life. During the day, I attended classes and pretended everything was normal, performing for the cameras I knew were still hidden throughout my apartment. At night, I worked with Remorseful Watcher to build our case against Brightwell operations. They taught me how to access the administrative backend of the streaming platform, where I found financial records showing monthly revenue of over $200,000 from subscriber fees. The money flowed through a complex web of shell companies and cryptocurrency exchanges, but Remorseful Watcher helped me trace several transactions back to a bank account in Delaware, registered to a man named Gordon Fletcher. I searched for Gordon and found he was a former military intelligence officer who'd been dishonorably discharged in 2015 for unauthorized surveillance of civilian targets. He'd taken his skills to the private sector and built an empire on violating people's privacy. I found 2 other names connected to Brightwell's operations: Angela Reeves, who managed the technical infrastructure from an apartment in Seattle, and David Kozlov, who handled recruitment and subject selection from somewhere in Eastern Europe. Remorseful Watcher provided me with IP addresses, email communications, and even photographs of these people that they'd collected during their time working for the organization. The evidence was damning, but I still needed something more, something that would make this story impossible to ignore. That's when Remorseful Watcher told me about the archives. Apparently, Brightwell kept backups of every stream they'd ever run, thousands of hours of footage from hundreds of subjects over several years, all stored on servers in Iceland because of their favorable data privacy laws and lack of cooperation with U.S. law enforcement. If I could access those archives, I'd have proof of a criminal enterprise operating on a scale that would force investigation. Remorseful Watcher gave me login credentials for the archive system, warning me that accessing it would probably trigger alerts and let Brightwell know we were planning something. I had maybe 48 hours after first login before they'd lock everything down and possibly come after me directly. So I waited until I had everything else prepared, the evidence compiled, the journalist contacts established, the media strategy planned. I coordinated with Remorseful Watcher to hit them simultaneously from multiple angles, releasing information through different channels so they couldn't suppress it all. We scheduled our attack for a Saturday morning at 3 a.m. when their monitoring would hopefully be at its lowest staffing and response would be slower. Kyle thought I was insane and refused to participate directly, but agreed to be ready to run if things went sideways. I spent that Friday packing a bag with essentials, clearing out my bank account in cash, and preparing for the possibility that I might need to disappear. At 3 a.m. on Saturday, I logged into the archive system from a coffee shop across town, using a stolen laptop I'd bought with cash from a guy on campus. The archives were massive, organized by subject number and date, containing footage from apartments, dorm rooms, even some houses where entire families were being monitored without knowledge. I downloaded everything I could access, prioritizing the most damaging footage, administrators visible in reflections, technical discussions in the chat revealing real names and locations, evidence of the interventions where they'd manipulated subjects' lives. I pulled down approximately 200 gigabyte of data before the system locked me out, and a message appeared on screen. "We're coming for you." I yanked the laptop's power cord and destroyed the hard drive with a hammer I'd brought specifically for this purpose, but the data was already uploading to multiple cloud services through a script Remorseful Watcher had written. Even if they caught me now, the evidence would survive. I ran back to my apartment to grab Kyle and my prepared bag, but found my door already broken open. Someone had been inside within the last hour, tossing my room thoroughly, looking for the laptop they assumed I'd used. They'd destroyed my regular laptop and taken my external hard drives, but they were too late. Everything important had already been uploaded. Kyle's room had been searched too, though less thoroughly since they probably knew he wasn't directly involved. We grabbed what we could and left through the back entrance, heading to a motel on the outskirts of town that accepted cash and didn't ask questions. From there, I reached out to my journalist contact, a woman named Patricia Williamson, who'd broken several major surveillance stories in the past. I sent her everything, and she responded within an hour. This is bigger than you realize. I need you to come to Seattle. We need to publish this before they bury you. Kyle and I drove through the night, taking back roads and avoiding highways with toll cameras. We dumped our phones in a river after removing the SIM cards, bought burners with cash at a gas station, and only communicated through encrypted apps on borrowed devices. Patricia met us at her office in a secure building with actual armed security and spent 6 hours going through everything I'd brought her. Her expression shifted from skeptical to shocked to absolutely furious as she reviewed the footage and documentation. She brought in her editor, their legal team, and a cybersecurity expert who verified the authenticity of everything. They wanted to publish within 48 hours, but needed me to go on record with my identity attached. I hesitated, knowing it would make me a permanent target. But Remorseful Watcher had sent a message that convinced me. 33 active subjects right now. You're the first one with a real chance to stop this. Don't waste it. The story went live on a Monday morning, accompanied by a 10,000-word investigative piece detailing Brightwell Operations' entire infrastructure. Patricia had coordinated with journalists at 4 other publications to release related stories simultaneously, overwhelming Brightwell's ability to suppress the information. Within hours, it was trending on every social media platform, picked up by major news networks, and generating calls for federal investigation. The FBI announced they were opening a probe into the organization within 24 hours. Gordon Fletcher, Angela Reeves, and David Kozlov all went dark, deleting their social media and presumably fleeing. The streaming platform went offline, though whether that was law enforcement seizing the servers or Brightwell trying to destroy evidence was unclear. Remorseful Watcher sent one final message. They're going to try to discredit you. Stay strong, you did the right thing. Then their account disappeared, and I never heard from them again. The backlash started almost immediately. Anonymous accounts on social media claimed I'd fabricated everything, that the footage was deep-faked, that I was actually a disgruntled employee trying to destroy a legitimate security research company. They posted my academic record with my worst grades highlighted, screenshots of stupid things I'd posted online years ago, anything to make me look unreliable and vindictive. Someone leaked my address to a forum known for harassment campaigns, and I started getting death threats. Patricia's publication stood by the story, but the coordinated attack on my credibility was sophisticated and relentless. I gave interviews to multiple news outlets, showed the physical cameras we'd found, provided technical analysis from experts who'd reviewed the streaming platform's code. Slowly, public opinion shifted back in my favor as more evidence emerged and other victims started coming forward. Over the next 3 months, 7 other people contacted Patricia's publication, claiming they'd been subjects of Brightwell surveillance. Each one had similar stories about finding cameras, discovering streams, realizing they'd been watched for months or years. A few had kept their cameras as evidence, and technical analysis proved they were all the same model, purchased through the same supplier, installed by people with identical training. The FBI investigation expanded to include dozens of subjects across multiple states, and federal charges were filed against Gordon Fletcher and Angela Reeves after they were arrested trying to board international flights. David Kozlov remained at large, presumably still in Eastern Europe somewhere beyond extradition. The streaming platform's servers in Iceland were seized through international cooperation, and forensic analysis confirmed they contained footage of over 200 different subjects spanning 5 years. The scope of the operation was staggering, and I'd only scratched the surface. Kyle struggled more than I did with the aftermath. He became paranoid about cameras everywhere, constantly checking for surveillance devices in any room he entered. He developed insomnia, unable to sleep knowing that strangers had watched him at his most vulnerable for months. He eventually dropped out of college and moved back home, unable to function in the environment where the trauma had occurred. I felt guilty about dragging him into this, even though neither of us had chosen to be victims. I stayed in school, partly because I refused to let Brightwell destroy my education, partly because dropping out felt like admitting defeat. But I moved to a different apartment, this time on the top floor of a building with controlled access and actual security cameras in the hallways. I checked every inch of my new place daily for the first month, paranoid they'd somehow followed me and reinstalled surveillance. The legal process was exhausting. I gave depositions, testified before a grand jury, and spent countless hours with investigators reconstructing the timeline of Brightwell's operations. The trial for Gordon Fletcher and Angela Reeves was scheduled for the following year, and I would be the prosecution's star witness. Their lawyers tried every tactic to discredit me, filing motions to exclude evidence, claiming I'd accessed the archives illegally and therefore the footage should be suppressed, arguing that their clients were simply running a legitimate security research operation and I'd misunderstood what I'd seen. The judge rejected most of their arguments, but the process was grueling and re-traumatizing, forcing me to relive the violation over and over while lawyers questioned every detail of my story. I received messages periodically from people claiming to be Remorseful Watcher, but I never could verify if any of them were genuine. Someone sent me an encrypted file containing additional evidence about Brightwell's operations, including details about their recruitment methods and training procedures for new surveillance operatives. I passed everything to the FBI, but never got confirmation about where it came from or whether Remorseful Watcher was still alive. Part of me hoped they'd escaped safely, that helping me had given them a chance to start over somewhere clean. Another part worried that Brightwell had found them and made an example to discourage other potential whistleblowers. I'd probably never know the truth, and had to live with the uncertainty of whether I'd gotten someone killed by accepting their help. Patricia won several journalism awards for her coverage of the Brightwell story, and used her platform to investigate similar surveillance operations. It turned out Brightwell wasn't unique. They were just one of several organizations exploiting weaknesses in privacy laws and enforcement to monetize unauthorized surveillance. Patricia's subsequent investigations exposed 3 more operations running similar schemes, leading to additional arrests and policy changes. I became something of an accidental activist, giving talks about privacy rights and surveillance technology, warning people about the hidden cameras that might be watching them right now. It wasn't a role I'd ever wanted, but someone had to speak for the victims who were too scared or traumatized to speak for themselves. 2 years after the initial story broke, Gordon Fletcher and Angela Reeves were convicted on multiple charges, including conspiracy, unauthorized surveillance, and wire fraud. Gordon got 15 years in federal prison, Angela got 12. David Kozlov remained on the FBI's most wanted list, believed to be operating from Russia, where he was beyond extradition. The civil lawsuits were still pending, with over 100 victims suing for damages related to invasion of privacy and emotional distress. My lawyers estimated I might eventually receive a settlement in the 6 figures, though the money felt meaningless compared to what had been taken from me. You can't buy back privacy once it's been violated. You can't unsee the knowledge that strangers watched your most intimate moments and turned them into entertainment. I still check every room I enter for hidden cameras, still cover my laptop's webcam with tape, still feel a spike of anxiety whenever I notice a smoke detector or vent that looks slightly off. The paranoia isn't entirely rational, but it's a survival mechanism I can't turn off. Kyle and I don't talk much anymore. He asked me to stop contacting him because every conversation reminded him of what happened, and I understood even though it hurt to lose one of the few people who truly knew what I'd been through. I made new friends at college, but I never told them about Brightwell unless I had to. The story was too big, too invasive to share casually. It became something I carried privately, a weight I'd learned to bear. Sometimes I wonder how many other operations like Brightwell are still running, how many people are being watched right now without knowing it, how many victims will never discover the truth because they don't happen to have a computer-savvy roommate who knows how to access the dark web. The thought keeps me awake some nights. The knowledge that what happened to me was neither unique nor rare, just unusual in that I'd found out and had the resources to fight back. Most victims never learn they're victims. They go through their lives believing they're alone in their bedrooms, when really they're performing for an invisible audience, their privacy stolen and sold without their knowledge or consent. I graduated last spring and moved across the country for a job, deliberately choosing a city where I had no history and no connections to anything that had happened. My apartment is small but secure, on the 4th floor with no buildings nearby that could provide a sightline into my windows. I still check for cameras regularly, still feel that spike of paranoia when I notice anything unusual. But slowly, gradually, I'm learning to feel safe again, learning to exist in private spaces without constantly performing for an imagined audience, learning that not every shadow hides a lens, not every person is watching me. The healing isn't linear and probably will never be complete, but it's progress. I still get emails sometimes from other Brightwell victims, people who found my contact information through Patricia's articles and wanted to share their stories or ask advice about coping with the trauma. I respond when I can, offering whatever support feels meaningful to people who've experienced the same violation I have. There's a strange community among us, bonded by shared trauma that no one else truly understands. We check in on each other, share resources about security and mental health, validate each other's paranoia as reasonable rather than excessive given what we've been through. It helps, knowing I'm not alone in how this changed me. The final member of Brightwell's leadership, David Kozlov, was arrested 3 months ago by Interpol in Montenegro after a tip from someone in the surveillance technology community. He's being extradited to face federal charges, and prosecutors say my testimony will be crucial at his trial. Part of me dreads going through the legal process again, but another part feels satisfied knowing the last person responsible will finally face consequences. It won't undo what happened, won't give back the privacy they stole, but it's as close to justice as I'm likely to get in this imperfect world. I think about remorseful watchers sometimes. Whoever they were, whatever happened to them, they risked everything to help me take down an organization they'd been part of, motivated by guilt or conscience, or perhaps just the recognition that what they were doing was fundamentally wrong. I hope they found peace, wherever they are now. I hope they know that their help saved not just me, but dozens of other victims who would have remained under surveillance if the operation hadn't been exposed. Their courage made all the difference, and I wish I could thank them properly, instead of just hoping they're out there somewhere, living safely under whatever new identity they've adopted. The cameras are gone now, physically removed and verified by security experts to be the only surveillance devices in my space. But I still feel watched sometimes, still have moments where I'm convinced there's a lens somewhere I haven't found yet. My therapist says that's normal, that trauma rewires how you perceive safety, and it takes time to retrain those responses. I'm working on it, slowly rebuilding my sense of security in private spaces, learning to exist without constantly monitoring myself through the imagined perspective of hidden cameras. Some days are better than others. Some days I can shower without checking the vents first. Some days I can sleep without covering every potential camera angle. Progress isn't linear, but it's real. Thanks for hanging out till the end. If you want more stories, make sure to subscribe and leave your take below.